So we are having a very beautiful festival here for the divine appearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. Every morning we sing a series of prayers to him about his glories, and it's almost hard to comprehend his glories. So we'll discuss some of the conception of Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada and his glories according to our spiritual masters. When we want to talk about how glorious someone is, everyone sees according to their own perception, yes? So you think about a personality like Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. For us, the best way to learn about somebody is from someone who knows them best. Make sense? And so, especially with our gurus, we know them according to different levels of realization. There's an example given from Vaishnavas. Prabhupada sometimes says like this. There was a young man who was born in a village, and later on they became a very high personality. They were in the post of prime minister. And they visited the same village, and someone who was a little bit not so educated heard about them, and they were very great. And they thought they were maybe the town leader of a neighboring town called a sarpanch. And so they were glorifying, oh, sarpanch ji, which means a village leader. Oh, and they were glorifying him so nicely. You're a village leader and you take so good care of all the villagers. And, they didn't know so much, but they were just glorifying him as one would glorify someone like that. They didn't understand that in reality he was president of a whole country, prime minister of a whole country, not one little village. So sometimes it's like that with our gurus. We glorify them. You did this, and then you did this, and then you did this, and it's so amazing. Our Gurudev, because he knows these personalities so well, he glorifies them from that relationship. Sometimes people would criticize our Gurudev, Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Swami Maharaj, because when he glorified Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, he would sometimes say the great achievements of his, especially the time when he was a world leader, teacher, establishing many temples, he said those achievements were not as great as the reality of his eternal position as Radha Krishna's eternal associate. But for us, from this worldly point of view, what is such a great achievement? He opened so many temples, he had thousands of followers, millions of his books being distributed, and they think of his glories in the context of these worldly affairs. And these are undoubtedly glorious achievements, extremely glorious. But if we only think of his glory in that way, then someone who is an influencer, someone who is a great organizer, a great spiritual leader, may have more followers, may have more centers, maybe more popular or famous. And so now is the glory of our Guru, in comparison to these other great leaders, diminished? And so Gurudev would say these glories of his are actually not his highest glories or his deepest glories. Our Gurudev would say, I've come to teach you the depths of the glories of your Swami Prabhupada. What are the depths of his glories? So it's a similar thing with Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. He was a world teacher. He established hundreds of centers through his disciples and personally in his own time, 64 centers. And he had daily newspaper. He had weekly journals and magazines in 5-6 languages. He was extremely intelligent. Anything he read once, he would completely memorized. Not only that, but he was excellent in composing poetry and literature. He was very entrenched in devotion to God. He chanted 1 billion names of the Lord over the span of 8-9 years. 1 billion names of God. Every day, 300,000 names of God. You can imagine that. He would dress in he wouldn't change his clothes because then you have to keep clothes and organize and wash. He would bathe every day in the river Ganga, the holy river, and then he would let that dry on his body. And he would sit there and chant. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. 12 hours without moving. And then he would chant his mantras, 2-3 hours. Then one time a day, he would collect some jungle sag, which means different leafy greens that are edible. And he would boil it, maybe with a little bit of rice all together, and he would eat that once a day. And he would maintain his life. And with extra time, he would still serve his father in his mission of distributing the message of Godhead. And so he would serve in publications. And this is all after he had performed many miraculous achievements. He had been a tutor to the prince of a great king and made that prince into a transcendentalist. The prince wanted to leave his kingdom and become a transcendentalist, a mendicant. And the queen became very angry hearing about this, and she made the king fire Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. But the king loved him so much, he gave him a lifetime pension. He said, no problem, I'm giving you this pension. At the time when he was teaching the prince, he read and memorized every book in the whole library just by going through it. He had that kind of intelligence, Shrutidar. Seeing it once, it was imprinted in his heart. And you think that's such a great achievement, right? We can read everything and memorize everything. And then there's the next level. You can compose things worthy of remembrance. What's a greater achievement? To be able to remember every book in the library, or to compose things that other people spend time memorizing. I remember living in the temple for many years. Every day I would memorize 2-3 verses of scripture. Our teacher there, our Prabhupada, Premananda Prabhu, would have us learn 2-3 verses of Bhagavad Gita every day. And then every afternoon he would come, and all the monks, 15-20 monks would sit down, they'd recite the verses and have us comment on them to see if we understood anything. So such a personality, Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, he composed literature. His words that he spoke was like scripture, because he quoted from all the scriptures, but also he elaborated on the philosophy in such a profound, impactful way that it left an indelible impression in people's hearts. He was so proficient in the English language. He is born in Bengal, so his mother tongue is Bengali, but he knew Hindi, he knew Sanskrit, he knew Oriya, but he spoke in such sophisticated English that educated Englishmen could not understand what he was saying. If they were to read one of his articles, they would have to consult a dictionary every 5 or 6 words. You imagine? And they would have grand assemblies, and the governor, the British governor would come, and great educated businessmen would come, and they would sit, and afterwards people would ask them, what did you learn from the talk? And they say, I couldn't understand anything, but I was astonished. And it left a deep impression in my heart. You imagine? So these are just a tiny touch of his glories. Since he was a child, even as an infant, he was always inclined to study scripture, and his father would go and give religious discourses in the grand assemblies, and he would bring his books and hear. He was always inclined to this process of hearing. When he was just a young infant, he had siblings. One of his elder brothers, actually, when he was still young, he got sick, one of his elder brothers, and it seemed like he was going to give up his life. And he was old enough, he was, a young boy. I don't know the exact details of the story, but he actually revealed that in his past life, he was a devotee in a different lineage. And he had criticized the followers of Lord Chaitanya and made offenses towards them. And so in this birth, he had prayed at the end of his life because he had received some negative reaction for that. There's different paths, there's different devotees, but really we should be careful not to judge others and think we are so great, and just because this is my religion, then it's the best one. This is called, a form of overzealous patriotism to our own, my hometown faith, my hometown religion. I've chosen it, so it's the best. And he was a little bit overzealous, and he was criticizing followers of Lord Chaitanya. And so in his next birth, he took birth in a family where a pure devotee associate of Lord Chaitanya had come, Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, his younger brother. And he prayed to his father to bring the dust of his younger brother's feet to give on his head and to forgive his offenses. And they did that, and then the signs of the different sampradayas, tilak, came on his body, and very blissfully he gave up his life and went to the spiritual world. So such a personality is Bhaktisiddhanta. When Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada was a young boy, his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, was the chief magistrate at that time in Jagannath Puri, and he would organize a lot of festivals for the Jagannath Temple, the very famous temple of Lord Jagannath, one of the most famous temples in India, and it's actually where there's a sacred talisman that is present within Jagannath that is connected to Lord Krishna and his appearance on earth 5,000 years ago. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur was organizing this temple, and they would have the annual Rath Yatra festival of chariots. And at the time of Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada's birth, his name was Bimal Prasad, the Rath cart, the chariot of Lord Jagannath, stopped in front of his home. Sometimes Jagannath is famous to do this. Nothing moves without the Lord's will. So he was in his chariot, and the chariot stopped right in front of the home of Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And he wouldn't move for days. And despite everyone, you imagine hundreds of people are trying to pull the cart, hundreds of people are trying to push the cart, and the Lord said, I'm not moving. Finally, Bhaktivinoda Thakur thought, what to do? Perhaps the Lord wants to see my son. His son was given the name Bimala Prasad. So Bimala Devi is one of the goddesses connected to the Jagannath temple, one of the energies of the Lord, and he gave him the name, the mercy of this Bimala Devi. So what they did is, he brought this baby and offered him to Lord Jagannath, and immediately Lord Jagannath's massive garland, Lord Jagannath is huge, like massive Lord Jagannath. The garland broke and fell on the boy as his blessing. And everyone understood the Lord gave special mercy to this boy, and he had some special desire for this boy to perform a great, great noble activity. So this is a very important story, and showing some indication of his bright future as a great, he's described to be a moon, a spiritual teacher that is glorious like 1,000 moons, and he's surrounded by 1,000 stars. You can also see his followers. His followers were such great scholars and got such great devotees, and he was surrounded by dozens and dozens of these extremely bright devotees, and together they propagated the message of pure bhakti, unadulterated, pure devotion to God from the platform of the self-realized soul. There's a verse that defines bhakti. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam tatparatvena nirmalam hrishikena hrishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchate. What is bhakti? It's an important verse to learn. It's described that bhakti is the natural sentiment of devotion to God when the soul is free of all false designations of life. I am this body, I am this mind. The soul is sinless, the soul is pure, but we develop these false coverings of life. And bhakti means pure devotion to God, but free of these false designations. Completely free. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam, completely free of all designations. It's a very high stage, right? Now we think it's very difficult to rid ourselves of this stage. There's a story we're going to tell in relation to this. What is the meaning of bhakti? Because Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada established this teaching very strongly. I'll tell you a story related to this story. Bhaktivinoda Thakur once was giving a grand religious assembly to thousands of people. And he would go like that and give religious discourses. He established many centers for kirtan, for bhakti, and particularly had one area where he would regularly give these religious discourses. And he had 100 people or so coming every every week or so. One time, Bhaktivinoda Thakur had to go on business away, and he was going to be gone for like a month. And so at that time, he told his son, at that time like a teenager, Bimal Prasad, and he said, you should give the discourses. You've been coming since you were 3-4 years old. So definitely you know something, and he knows how bright he is. He would be able to recite. You see some kids in India, by the time they're 7 or 8, they can recite the whole Gita by memory. So you imagine Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, he already knows the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, all scripture. And so Bhaktivinoda Thakur had his son give lectures. And you imagine all these people, religious people, and they're all assembled and much older, many of them. Generally we see people very religiously inclined in their middle age or, even older age. So you have all these people, and Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, young, like Sukadev Goswami, dressed properly, not like that, like Sukadev, but giving these discourses like a young man. And he was heavy. He didn't pull any punches, as you say. He was very strong. He said, devotion to God should be free of any material designations of life. And devotion of God should be unadulterated without any self-interest that is related to matter. This is our spiritual self-interest. And ultimately, we should study spiritual life to free ourselves from the bondage of false conception of life, that even I am this mind, I am this body. That is all a false conception. It is not the eternal nature of the soul. The soul is pure. The soul is free of sin. The soul is transcendental. The soul is the Atman. The soul is the awareness behind your thoughts and the oscillations of the mind. The mind is always accepting and rejecting things according to likes and dislikes, according to your particular nature. We think we are the mind, yes? We're going to tell a story about this in a minute. It's hard. We can intellectually understand we are not this body. Anyone can get that, right? Right? You're a young man. You're a young man. You're a young man. You're a dignified lady, somewhat elderly, grandmother. But you can also conceptually understand that actually I'm not this body because, what was I before this body was born? What will I be after this body? Krishna spoke this in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita. The second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse after verse after verse, Krishna said, I'm not this body. You are not this body. We are the eternal spirit. So we can understand this. I'm not the body, I'm spirit. And people can intellectually understand that. But Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada was very strong. He said, you are also not this false ego that you are thinking you are. And you're very attached to this false ego, and you're very attached to your religion, but not to the essential transcendental nature of the spirit and relation to God. That is transcendental. The soul is not Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, Hindu. The soul is pure spirit, and it's a part and particle of the supreme spirit or of God. Mamai vangso jiva loke. Krishna says, you are my angsa, my part. Vibhinangsa tattva, separated part and parcel of the supreme absolute truth, that is the soul. And so he spoke very strongly against people's misconceptions. There are many misconceptions that always come up. That's why some people say, yatamat tatapat. Whatever your idea is, that's a valid path. And he said, this is bogus. People say, whatever path you take, it'll take you to the same destination. He said, how is that possible? And he quoted, if you want to go to Hawaii, you can't take a car. So people say if you take a car or a buggy or a train, it takes you to the same destination. It's just different speeds. And he said, no, you can't go to Hawaii by car. You have to go to an airplane or a boat. And whatever path you choose won't lead you to the same destination. Right? Or it may not lead you to any destination. If you don't know where you're going, you don't have a goal, you're just going in circles. Or you're going this place, that place, the other place. According to your process and according to your aspiration, it will lead you to a certain destination. So he was very heavy, and especially at that time in Bengal, there were many misconceptions, many misconceptions. And so he was not into compromising the ideals of Scripture. He was unabashedly promoting the pure truth. And therefore people would get disturbed. And when his father, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, came home, he saw there was only a few people left in the assembly. This young boy had been preaching so powerfully that one by one, instead of the numbers increasing, it was decreasing. And people think, oh, well, that means he was doing a bad job. Yes? What do you think? But without preaching the uncompromising truth, how can you have any purity or any force? How can you actually develop something with a clear conception? So it was his father's desire, and he was testing to see him. But they were working in tandem. One is the liberal approach that reconciles everyone with everything and gives a universal message. But as you come within that, then you have to teach the specificity of the spiritual path to enlightenment, and also to separate material from spiritual, because oftentimes the spirit gets mixed up with the material message. It happens often in religious circles, that we engage spirit in service of matter. It's very common. But Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada said, no, matter is just matter, but the soul is spirit, and that's something connected to Krishna, and we should realize our connection to Krishna and transcend the bondage of matter. Then we can live within the material world as a servant of God and as a beneficiary to the whole world, as a benefactor to the whole world, as a true philanthropist. He said the greatest philanthropy is saving one soul from samsara, the cycle of birth and death. He said it's a greater charitable act than opening thousands and thousands of hospitals. So he was unpopular for that reason. For many reasons he was unpopular. But you look at his movement now and how it's spreading to every corner of the world, and how more and more he's being understood as such a great spiritual teacher that is unprecedented in the world, actually. Uncompromising, unconventional. We have a song about him that we're going to read by Bhaktisiddhanta Swami Prabhupada, and it glorifies him and his unconventional approach to preaching the truth very powerfully. One time, because he was preaching so powerfully, he also preached that because the soul is inherently part and parcel of God, then the soul is qualified for spiritual life regardless of their material conditioning. So someone may be born in a lower class or from a family that's engaged in very sinful activities, but that doesn't define them. Oftentimes you're defined by your heritage, by your background, or you're from the wrong side of the tracks in spiritual terms. And so you can't take initiation, you can't take these mantras, you can't become a teacher. And some people say, okay, you can take mantras, you can take initiation, but you can't become a teacher. But that's not actually according to the scriptures. Prahlad Maharaj, one of the great 12 teachers of the scripture, called a Mahajan, he was born in a family of the greatest demons. His father was the most famous demon in history. Famous in the sense that he was infamous, the original tyrant, terrorist of the universe. And he was his son. But he's considered one of the greatest personalities in history. So you are not defined by your parentage. You are not defined by your own material conditioning even. That's why when you come to a spiritual personality, a real guru, they don't see you as your material condition of life. They see your spiritual nature and your spiritual potential and are waking you into that. They don't think, oh, you've taken drugs, you've been a womanizer, you've been a this, even you've been a sinner, a great sinner, you've caused harm to others. And they say no. In the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, the torchlight of divine knowledge immediately burns away all sin, all contamination, all ignorance, and makes you yourself situated on a divine platform. So it said, you don't have to worry about all those things because you're also not the mind. Right? We said it's easy to think I'm not this body. Easier. But to understand that I am not this ego also, I am the awareness, I am the Atma behind it, beyond it. And that is a great mystery, the greatest of mysteries. I am Atma. What is that nature of that Atma? It's the greatest mystery. We think we are the mind, yes? Because that is what we are so attached to. Right now, I'm speaking it from my own point of view. I am very attached to this me, this name, this service, this occupation, this personality. But that is all temporary. It is not the Atma. There's a story we're going to hear which says you are not the mind, you are not the body. You are not the dreamer in your dream. You are transcendental to that. You are Atma. What is the nature of that Atma? So we're going to hear this story. I'm keeping teasing it, but trying to get to the point where I'm ready for it. Right? Imagine that like this, okay? We think I'm the mind. But say we're born, in Hinduism, in Sanatana Dharma, we have this idea of reincarnation. So imagine you're born, next life as a cat. Okay? What is your ego as a cat? And if your eternal nature is what you are now, then what happens when you become a cat and you're thinking cat thoughts? If you're a cat, then, you're thinking cat thoughts. Right? So are you cat? And then next life, the cat is always thinking of the dog. There's a story of changing bodies. Actually, there's a practical story of changing bodies with the guru and his disciple. One time it's not even his disciple, but there was a mouse that was afraid of a cat. And so it ran into a guru's ashram, and the guru saw the distressed position of the mouse and knew its desire to become a cat, and so it made it into a cat. The guru made the mouse into a cat. So then it was freed from the cat problem. But then after some time, the cat had a dog problem. Ruff, 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 ruff. The cat was very happy because all the mice that it had been, now it could, be in that position of the powerful cat. And none of the cats, would challenge it. But then it had a dog problem. So the guru saw its desire and made him a dog. And then after some time, the dog had a tiger problem. So the guru made a dog a tiger. And after some time, the tiger had a guru problem. The story goes that everyone in the jungle started making fun of this tiger. Oh, you were just a mouse, and you became a cat, and you became a dog. Now you're a tiger. But really, everything is coming from this guru. You're not a self-made tiger. The guru made you into a tiger. And so then he came with his licking his lips to eat the guru, and the guru said, okay, again become a mouse. So this is changing bodies. But the idea here is that when you're a cat or a dog, what is your consciousness covered over in that state of that ego? So to understand that I am Atma, that I am not cat or I'm not dog. I'm not the body of the cat, I'm not the mind of that cat. You see how cats play, you give a red pointer, you point at the wall and the cat goes and jumps in, and they run around day and night chasing a red dot. And if I do that with you as a human being, you won't do it. But that Atma within the cat, that Atma within you, they have the same nature, which is spiritual. But it's covered over by false ego and by the temporary mind. If you're born in the body of a woman, or if you're born in the body of a mind, the Atma underlying that, the underlying principle is the same. Krishna says in the Gita, the Atma is unchanging because it's coming from a divine nature. It is eternally pure, sinless Atma. And it takes on these coverings, these ego states, but it's not its eternal nature. And it's tethered to these conceptions, so it's attached to them, and it's like it's playing through them. It's like playing these roles, right? You see something, you see a bird, and you think, wow, that'd be great to be a bird. Our Gurudev would say, people who are surfing day and night, they love surfing so much, so God thinks, well, not even God, the karmic power of the universe, which is also created by your own Atma. The idea is that your Atma becomes attached to this experience, and so you get a form that corresponds more directly to your desire. Does it make sense? So, okay, become a dolphin, become a whale, become a flying fish. If you're a wind kite surfer or whatever, then you become a jumping fish because it's better for you. Swami Prabhupada would say, if you like eating raw meat, become a carnivorous animal that doesn't have to use utensils, that can hunt and eat with its own things, right? Its own bodily parts. So my point here making, I'm going to move forward on the topic, is we are also not this mind. We are something deeper than the mind. Because as a man, I have some amount of man thoughts. As a woman, I have some amount of female thoughts, male, female thoughts. But the Atma that underlines it is not male, not female. And so if that thought as a female is not eternal, or that thought as a male is not eternal, then that is not me, because I am eternal. That is the message of the Gita, that you are eternal. Najayate mriyate vakarachin nayang bhutva bhavitavana bhuya jo nitya sasvato yang purano nahanyate hanyamane sarire. The soul is not slain when the body is slain. The soul is unborn, undying, primeval, ever youthful. So inquire into that nature of that supreme soul. So Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada spoke the truth, and then he talked about many higher truths. But people opposed him at every level because he spoke what was also unpleasant truths. He was unconventional, and he would give initiation to people not born in a Brahmin body. And he would say the soul is not, what is a Brahmin is not the body, because the soul is not the body. So is your body a Brahmin, or is your soul Brahmin? You understand? So a soul that is evolving, that develops some piety, may be born in a Brahmin family. So it's like it's going in a good direction. But that body does not make you a greater person than someone born in a lower class. And everyone has the right to practice spiritual life. Everyone has the right to practice spiritual life. In the Ramayana, Lord Ram helped even the animals practice spiritual life. The squirrels, the bears, the vulture, Jatayu, the bear, Jambavan, Hanuman, Sugriv, Kakbusandi, a crow, became a great devotee of the Lord. Garuda, an eagle. So every soul by its very nature is part and parcel of God and is divine. So Bhaktisiddhanta spoke like that, and it broke down the walls of sectarian, compartmentalized, caste system spirituality. And so people were very upset. And they attacked him. They tried to kill him at one point. So he was such a great personality, such a great preacher. I promise I'm getting to this story soon. But I'm trying to spend some time glorifying Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada as well. These are all the things we can see with our eyes and hear about. What you cannot see with your eyes, what you cannot hear about, unless you take shelter of someone who knows him best, are his transcendental activities. I feel very fortunate that in my life in India over many years, my mentor there would teach us, all the students, about the transcendental nature of our spiritual masters. That they are not just what we hear about and see or have been told about their activities in this world. They are transcendental and they are associates of Krishna. So our Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, specifically as a maidservant of Sri Radha, his name is Nayana Mani Manjari, which means the pupil of Sri Radha's eyes. And when she glances to this world out of her mercy, then he comes to this world and distributes these teachings of spiritual life and gives us the opportunity to come into their loving service. So every morning we sing in Mangalarti. What do we sing? What do we sing? The fourth verse. It's fourth verse. Mangalarti, fourth verse. Subha drishti karo ebe jagat tera prati jagu ka hridhoye mora sumangala rate. O Radha Krishna, O divine couple, specifically O Radharani, when will you glance towards this world with compassion? Subha drishti karo ebe jagat tera prati. When will you look towards this world with a heart melted in compassion for the suffering of the conditioned souls? So when she looks towards this world with compassion, Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada appeared. Such a glorious personality. Our gurus teach us of that reality because they know him in that reality. You see the difference? So we can speak about what we've heard and seen of their activities in this world, but what do we know of what they are doing now? I like to talk about this for our appearance days of our gurus. Yes, they appeared at this time. Now it's 150th year since his appearance. But actually, is he not transcendental? Yes, he appeared in this world, therefore we celebrate the year of his appearance, the day of his appearance. But actually, every day is Guru Puja. Every day is his appearance. Like the sun rises every day, but the sun is rising relative to us. The sun is always risen. You understand the difference? What is your point of view about your guru? Make sense? Oh, it's the sunrise. Let's get together. We're going to watch the sunrise. Our Gurudev is coming. Gurudev is coming. The sun is always risen. We are seeing sunrise according to our frame of reference and our perception, and that is Guru. But Guru is always risen. Guru is always illustrious. God does not appear and disappear. God is always in present. Bhaktisiddhanta, Param Gurudev, his disciple, said, if you see a man walking, here we have 4 windows next to each other. So you see a man walking this way and he appears. Oh, there's somebody, he just appeared. Oh, he disappeared. Oh, he appeared. Oh, he disappeared. Oh, he appeared. We have 4 windows next to each other, right? Oh, he appeared, he disappeared, he's gone. Oh, no, alas. He was present before he appeared in the window, and he's present after he disappeared from the window. So these are the liberated souls. Now, what's the difference between a conditioned soul and a liberated soul? Conditioned soul, when they appear in this body and take birth, and when they disappear from this body or die, then that ego state of whatever it was is now gone. You understand? It's merciful, right? It's like, yes, I get to give up this ego state. But the pure souls, they carry because they're liberated. So they don't lose that what they were or who they were, because that's the pure, realized soul, liberated soul, fully perfected soul. The highest potentiality of that soul has been achieved. So then at that point, Krishna says in the Gita, you no longer lose your identity because you've realized your highest identity and you've given up the false material identities. So therefore these personalities are worshipped. Krishna says in the Gita, I have appeared millions of times. The difference between you and I is that I remember them all and my consciousness doesn't change. So once we achieve the liberated platform of spiritual life, then no longer are we actually living out our temporary lives and our temporary egos. Then we've achieved our pure self-identity. And this is the difference between our philosophy and those who don't believe in the eternality of the soul ultimately. There are many who say the soul ultimately is just part of that cosmic web of consciousness and it loses all identity when it merges into the supreme consciousness. But that's considered a form of spiritual suicide in our scriptures. Really, coming to self-enlightenment, self-realization means to realize your unique nature, who you are by nature in your highest perfection, that is eternal, that you come into realization, then it's not lost. So you do exist. Okay? You are not this ego. You are not this ego. Now this ego as a devotee is favorable to you progressing. That's why it said in scripture, the mind that is your friend grants you liberation, and the mind that is your enemy drags you to hell. But we are not the mind. But you have to learn to make that mind your friend. That means your accomplice in your spiritual development. So even though I am not the mind, I am tethered to the mind, and the mind is tethered to the body. So I will engage that mind and I will engage that body in service of God and in the process of self-realization. So they say, maneva samuktanam. The mind is the cause of liberation. The mind is the cause of bondage. So therefore, you master your mind, then it is the cause of your liberation. And if you are the slave of your mind, it is the cause of your damnation. So even though we are on that wheel of material nature, we have a means to escape. We have the key to open the lock, especially in this human form of life. In fact, primarily in this human form of life, we have the key to unlock our shackles of material nature, but we also pray for divine help and intervention to give us the courage and the strength to do this process. All right? So this body, because we are devotees of Krishna, is very favorable, so we utilize it. The mind becomes favorable, so we utilize it. So Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada preached, and he created a revolution in the world. And our Gurudev would say his highest glories is that he is a direct associate of Radha Krishna. And we sing a song in the morning, his glories, very beautiful. I wanted to get to the point, we have time. I wanted to tell a few more stories, but I also want to glorify him with the song by Swami Prabhupada. We'll see if we get to that. But a little bit, I want to say a few verses about his glories from this song written by his disciple, Srila Bhakti Rakshak Srila Goswami Maharaj. Which page? 2? Let's see, 257 or 357? Let's see. Perfect. All right. Listen to his glory. So this is one of those people who actually knows him, right? We know according to what we can see and perceive or hear. But his real glories, like I said, we shouldn't just call him a sarpanch, a village leader, when he is in fact something much grander, much greater. So it's described that his 2 lotus feet are worshipped by an unlimited number of saintly persons. He is the most competent personality to lead the process of realization for this age, or Nam Sankirtan. His lotus feet grant all kinds of benedictions and fearlessness. He is the leader of the assembly of saints who are powerful in spiritual life. He is most compassionate to the fallen. He is their sole refuge. And it glorifies his form, his feature. He is the pleasing moon for his servitor stars. With the excellence of a roaring lion, he removes inimical persons, causing them to flee in fear. Choosing the shelter of his feet, the innocent gain auspiciousness. He has widely spread the splendor of Gauranga's holy abode, Navadvip. He has glorified Sri Gauranga's mercy throughout the whole world. He has bestowed Gauranga's holy feet upon those who are most desperate for mercy. He is the eternal refuge and universal guru for the devotees of Sri Gauranga, Lord Chaitanya. He shares renown with Raghunath Das, Rupa, and Sanatana Goswamis. He has glorified the world over for emulating the philosophical genius of Srila Jiva Goswami. He shares friendship with Kaviraj Goswami and Narottam Das Thakur. Out of mercy, he reveals himself as the embodiment of Hari Kirtan. He is an eternal associate of Lord Chaitanya, born to remove the great burden of the earth. His nature is even more loving and affectionate than that of a father. He is a desire tree of benedictions for his surrendered servants. His patience and benevolence put a tree to shame. His divine feet are worshipped by the best of those who offer benedictions. He is the best amongst liberated souls. He holds the treasure of the ultimate objective of life, or pure love of God. He accepts the dress of a mendicant sannyasi to uplift the fallen souls. His feet are carefully served by the best amongst sannyasis. He is the most beloved attendant of the daughter of King Vrishabhanu. So the last verse is glorifying his transcendental nature. He is the most beloved servant of the daughter of King Vrishabhanu, her attendant. That means her direct maid. I have taken shelter of his feet by keeping their dust on my head. Those feet possess immense and astonishing power to purify. I therefore forever offer pranam unto the lotus feet of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada. So he's so glorious. He opened many temples in his life. He had many students take shelter of him. He preached throughout the whole world. Every center he made is called Vrajapatan. It means a branch office of Vrindavan. A branch office of Vrindavan, and by serving there, one can gain entrance. Rather, one can gain eligibility to enter within Vrindavan. Right? So this is your training process to enter eternal Vrindavan by serving in one of the temples, by serving the deities, by cooking for the deities, by cleaning the temple, by distributing the message. These are all the process of entrance or eligibility exam, entrance exams. That's the word I was looking for. Serving in these temples is your entrance exams to the spiritual world. Right? So this is your entrance test, your entrance exam. And that takes time. It's a time-consuming process. You want to enter the spiritual world beyond moksha, beyond liberation, and beyond even the liberated planets, but to the highest of all the liberated planets, where you get to be a direct friend of the Lord, where you transcend even conception of His majesty and enter a mood of sweetness as His dear friend, as in a parental mood, or as a lover or beloved, or as the dear associate of His beloved, Sri Radha. So to enter into that realm is a very high eligibility. It takes time. People in this day and age are very impatient. So that's why there's this important story I'm going to tell. There's some important teachings of this story. One of them is the importance of patience. This is a good segue into this. I wasn't thinking about it like this, but it's a good segue. Okay, I told everyone here I was going to tell a story. All right, ready? Much teased. Now, we'll tell you the story. Once upon a time. Not in a galaxy far, far away. But in our local galaxy, in our local universe, in our local system. This is a great story. All right, I want you to go back in your minds to a bygone age. Yes? A long ago age. You could say the dawn of an age, the dawn of a new age. And it was one of those ancient times when, the mankind was still in its infancy, still young. All right, you ready for the story now? So it's a story of ashram life. Why do we come to an ashram? What is the purpose of living in an ashram? What is the objective of living in an ashram? So one of the original stories about ashram life comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. And it's a story of Lord Brahma, the first created being, Indra, the king of heaven, and Virochana, the king of the subterranean planets. All right? These are the three main characters. Chandogya Upanishad. So one time, Lord Brahma, who is Lord Brahma? I'll give you a little bit of background of these three main characters. Lord Brahma is the first created being in this universe. The first created being, the first son of God. So I'm not going to give you the whole creation story, but the essence is that Lord Brahma came from the Lord directly. The Lord was his father and mother directly. He was born from the navel of the Lord, and he appeared, and he did austerities, and he got divine knowledge by the mercy of the Lord. He realized the nature of the soul, the nature of this creation, the nature of God, and the purpose of life. He realized all these things by God's mercy and by chanting these mantras that we also chant. Gopal mantra and these different Gayatri mantras that we also have the opportunity to chant. These mantras were chanted by Lord Brahma and bestowed upon him by Lord Krishna, the Supreme Lord. And by chanting these mantras, he achieved self-realization. So sometime after this, he created the different planetary systems, and he reanimated all these archetypes of being, and then the souls that were already present from the previous creation entered into these forms. So he is considered the secondary creator. and the architect of the planetary systems. It's a very complicated story, but it's in the Srimad Bhagavatam if you're interested in reading more. Okay? So, Lord Brahma now began speaking about the reality of the Atma, the soul. And everyone had great respect for him, especially there's mankind on this earthly plane who does not, and they do not have access to the demigods or to the lower gods. They're called demigods and demons, but actually they're both of a almost divine nature compared to human beings. There are subterranean planets in the scriptures where the beings there have supernatural powers, and they're the brothers of the demigods who are the rulers of the universal administration. The god of wind, the god of fire, the god of the ocean, the god of the thunder. All these different demigods are present. There's millions of them. And on the lower regions, there are cousin brothers who are always fighting with them. And the demigods are those who are serving the will of God to create a harmonious, stable environment by which people can progress towards self-realization. That's the demigods. And the demons are those who are opposing them and fighting with them. But both are different levels of realized souls or conditioned souls. So that's not really the point of the story, but that's a little background. All right? So now Lord Brahma began speaking about the nature of the Atma, the self, and he said that the self is eternally pure, sinless, extremely powerful, luminous like 1,000 suns, and those who achieve knowledge of the self and realization of the self become the most powerful beings, able to conquer over all the worlds and achieve all their desires. So this news spread. Lord Brahma, the first created being, is now speaking about the essential nature of the self, and people naturally are inquisitive about that. What is the self, right? Because we're very attached to ourself. And so someone can teach you what is the self of the self, the real self. People are inquisitive. So Indra, the king of heaven, and Virochana, the king of the subterranean regions, and a very powerful personality in his own right, they both sought out Lord Brahma and asked if they could live in his ashram and become his disciple. And they said, "Oh, dear Brahma, please, we are offering ourselves to you. Please accept us as your students, as your disciples, and teach us about what is the Atma. Teach us about the essential nature of the self. Who am I?" And Brahma said, "So be it. The purpose of you residing in my ashram is to realize who you are. Not as this temporary self, but who are you as your eternal true self? What is the nature of the Atma?" And that is the purpose of living in an ashram. An ashram means a place where you go to free yourself of the false conceptions of life that caused you so much pain and suffering because of your attachment to them. That is why you come to an ashram. And Lord Brahma said to them, "You must live in my ashram for at least," how long? Yes, how long? "You must live in my ashram for 32 years. Is what he told them. For 32 years. When I first started living in India, my guru told me since I was 10 to live in his ashram when I came of manhood. After my school, after I graduated, he said, "You'll come and live in my ashram." I was this old, and he said, "When you're like this, you'll come." I was standing, he was like this, and then when you're, a young man, when you're tall, mature, you'll come live in the monastery. And once I did, my mentor there said, "You should try to get at least a 5-year student visa, because if you're always going back and forth, what self-realization can you really achieve? You're living in two worlds, spiritual world and the material world. An ashram is your entry examination place for entrance in the spiritual world. That is ashram life. You're preparing to enter the spiritual world as a liberated soul. And so if you're always going back and forth, it's like, it's like playing hooky from school." So he told these two students, you imagine they had to give up all their administrative affairs. "Oh, but I am the king of heaven. Oh, but I am the king of the heavenly subterranean regions. How will I give that up?" But they had desire for this, and they're living celestial time spans. So for them, 32 years is also not the end of the world. They're celestial beings, right? For us, 32 years of life, it's like, wow, how is that possible? That's the best time of my life. I'm 20 now, and the next 32 years of my life, I'm going to be 52. It's like an incarceration. I'm in prison. Ashram life is not prison. Ashram life frees you from the prison of material life. All right? So he said 32 years ashram study. 32 years. And for 32 years, they served in his ashram, living very simply, following a very sattvic diet. That means in the mode of goodness, a very pure diet that helps the cultivation of spiritual knowledge, living austerely, serving the cows, maintaining the different necessities in the ashram. And he told them, don't look at yourself in a mirror. Don't look at yourself in a body of water. I want to free you from all your ideas of the self that you have grown up with. I lived in temple life, and they would let us use a mirror that's like half an inch wide by maybe an inch or two tall. Just enough to put on your symbol, your marking as a Vaishnava. So you can see your forehead and put this part on, and you can see your nose and put this part on. That's it. Nowadays, all the time, we can look at ourselves. Everywhere we're surrounded by mirrors. Right? So he said, try to realize the Atma. That is why you've joined the ashram. And for 32 years they studied. And he gave them some simple teachings, but mostly, more important than just giving a teaching is realizing the teaching. So the teacher will help you in such a way that will bring you to realization of the teaching. Otherwise, they can speak day and night, day and night, day and night, day and night. What can you understand? What can you absorb? What can you realize? You understand? It's a process. So after 32 years, they came to him and he said, very nice. Now you can go look at yourself. They had long fingernails, long hair, 32 years of dreadlocks. They had not washed their hair. They lived but they were very powerful from their austerities. That's another thing about spiritual life. Temple life is a form of austerity, tolerating so many different conditions. And it gives you great spiritual potency. In the Bhagavad Puran, it said that it is only by tapas or austerity that the universe is created. It is only by tapas, austerity, that the universe is maintained. It is only by tapas, austerity, that any achievement is able to be accomplished. It is tapas alone that is the source of all power. So by their tapas, they were very effulgent. And he said, go look at yourself. They looked at themselves. Okay, it's a special day, so we'll go a little bit longer, okay? So they looked at themselves. And he came back to him. And he said, now I want you to cut your nails, shave your face, bathe very nicely, clean your bodies very nicely, and then dress. He gave them new cloth and everything, and they came to him. And now they're shining radiant like the sun from their 32 years of austerities, following perfect celibacy. 32 years without ever losing any ounce of their energy. That's called Urvadretas. All your spiritual potency comes to your crown chakra, and we see sages who live with all their energy in their crown chakra. Some of them, we've heard stories, and our gurus and those I've had as mentors have seen people whose soul, when they leave the body, there's an opening in the crown chakra, and they directly go to liberation because they have lived a perfect life of austerities. So they lived like that for 32 years, and they were effulgent. And Brahma said, that person now that you see in the water, they had a very clear pond. That person that you see there, that effulgent being, radiant and powerful, that is the Atma, that is the self. You are that powerful, strong person. And therefore, you should enjoy this world. That is the purport. That is you, that is the Atma. And the idea is that by self-development of this material body, by austerities, by discipline, you can come to a very strong position, and you can then be a lord over the material nature. You see what he's telling them? Does it make sense? In the beginning of the story, he said that the Atma is the most powerful force. And if you're able to realize the Atma, Then you can rule over the worlds and achieve all your desires. So people heard this and thought, oh, that is what I want. The king of heaven is always fighting with his competitor. Now the two competitors of the universe, these are the two, opposing forces in the universe. The king of the heavens and the king of the hells, right? These are the two kings coming to have a race to see who can realize the Atma first, so that they can become the most powerful and rule over the world. And so he told them, oh, this itself that you're looking at, that is the self. And by self-development, you can become a conqueror. In the Bhagavatam, in the end, the last canto, one of the last chapters, it's the song of Mother Earth. And she says, so many fools have tried to rule over me. And I've seen them come and go just like ants fighting over a little bit of territory. They think, I am the ruler of this land, and after my great cunning, I'll rule over this land. And by my austerities, by my power of self-development, I will become very powerful. Myself will become of such stature that my shadow will be cast upon the whole land. Right? And there are many gurus who teach you how to achieve self-development, but what does that mean? How to be a bigger ego, a more powerful ego. Able to subjugate others, or able to influence others, able to develop mystic powers to control others. This is the purpose of spiritual life. This is the Atma, you, this body, this time, this chance. Make the most of it to be powerful. And the 16th chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, this is the nature of the demons. Ishvaroham, this body is the Lord and creator and controller. I should enjoy. So Virochana, the king of the hellish regions, took this message to heart and went and began to propagate it. This body is the Atma, and we should enjoy as much as we can and use this body for self-development. More exercise, more diet restrictions, more austerities, more study, so we can become the wealthiest or the most powerful person on this planet. That is the purpose of life. Virochana took this message back to his people and propagated this message of materialism. Indra started going back to his abode. On the way back, he thought, is that really the message? Is that really the Atma? Is that really who I am? That's it? And he went back to Lord Brahma, and he said, oh, Lord Brahma, how can it be this? I am very powerful, very strong now by my austerities. What about others who are very weak, who are suffering? What about others who are crippled, who are blind, who die immaturely? But I have heard that the soul is of a divine nature. Good. We're almost finished here. Or we could keep going for an hour. But we'll try to be finished soon. Okay? So, you like the story?
Yes.
Jai Kanchana Haribo. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Radhe Radhe. We're just finishing up here and then we're going to do a song. All right, everybody. Haribo. Hope this isn't too tedious for you. All right. So the next layer of self-realization. From I am not this body to what am I next? So he again came and took shelter of Lord Brahma, and Lord Brahma said, what? Again you must study in my school. For how long? Another 32 years. It's a very difficult story. We're like, oh man, I got to do 64 years just to get to this second stage of knowledge of the self. In our line, it's okay. We've sped up the process a bit. It's all right. You don't have to wait 64 years to get to this second part of the story. Actually, it's been a couple months. Kanchana, she just arrived and she's going to hear it.
Listening to your live stream the whole drive here, so I'm in the loop.
Okay, she's in the loop. Great. See, the power of modern technology.
Yes, and you said you're going longer, and I was like,
And Thakurji's here too. Okay, great. We're waiting for Thakurji to arrive so we could sing to them tonight. All right. So, Indra came back. He said, okay, 32 years more. And again, he fasted. Again, he practiced celibacy. Again, he practiced all the yam niyam. Again, he did all the services. And after 32 years, Lord Brahma told him, that dreamer, when you're asleep, that mental state, that egoic state, that is the Atma. You are not the body, but you are the mind. And Indra thought, okay, I'm the mind. And he walked off. And then he got about halfway out of the ashram and he thought, wait a second. And he came back and he said, when I'm dreaming, I'm being chased by a tiger. And it's about to catch me and kill me. And then I wake up and I'm fine. Like it wasn't real. And then when I'm dreaming, I become very wealthy. I get all this gold. And I wake up, I don't have any of it. Has that ever happened to you? I used to dream when we're fasting that I was eating some amazing, delicious sweet. Because we do our fast for Krishna's birth or for different fast days. And I'm dreaming and it's like a deep fast. We haven't had water. We haven't had food. And we're in the dream. And I just remember dreaming like, usually the dreams I have about fasting is like, it's in the fridge right now waiting for me. This special thing. And I wake up and go look in the fridge and it's not there. That's how it usually happens. I don't remember them recently, but I would be dreaming and like, oh, I've been fasting for so long. And you know, that thing that you really want to break your fast with, the most delicious thing, you're thinking, just that right thing. And God's been so merciful to me that he's put it in the fridge waiting for me. And all I have to do is wake up and go and eat it. And you wake up and you go look in the fridge and it's not there. So Indra's thought, how can that be the Atma? How can that be the Atma? So he came back to Lord Brahma and said, please tell me what is the nature of the Atma? What is the nature of the soul? What is the nature of the self? And he said, okay, very good. Again, you must study for how long? This time he said, 5 years. He was getting closer. So for 5 years he served, he studied, he lived in the ashram practicing austerities. At the end of it, he gained full self-realization. We'll continue this story. What does it mean, self-realization? But the point I'm trying to make is that don't think this is a cheap thing, a cheap process. And also, we shouldn't become so crazy to think, you know, I have this body, use this body for service. I have this mind, this ego. That's not bad. But it should be engaged properly. And you should not attach your full self-identity to something that is temporary. At least conceptually, try to understand that you are eternal spirit. All right? I am eternal spirit. I am transcendental. And fear arises from separate identification from God. And fearlessness comes from realizing connection to God and my eternal spiritual nature. Then I become fearless. And we take shelter of the gurus in our line to come to a state of connection with God, transcending the material bondage of life, realizing our eternal self. And we have this. We have these roles. We have these plays. We do, you know, and that's fine. And also in this human form of life, it's very favorable. So this is an important balance I have to make about this topic. Sometimes people hear, I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, and you're just like lost in this kind of like limbo of non-embodiedness, right? What am I then? I'm just like this particle floating around in the universe? No. This human form of life that with which we are hearing this message is a suitable boat to cross over the ocean of birth and death. So therefore, I should use this and honor this body and care for this body as a vessel of service to God and to this world, but also as a vessel that can take me over the ocean of birth and death to pure knowledge of the self, to realization of the true nature of the self beyond the cycle of birth and death. So Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada preached this around the world very powerfully. We'll have to do a continuing class of his glories tomorrow because he did not just preach this. This is actually just a very foundational teaching. All these stories we've told, that is actually just like not like the ground floor of his teachings, the entrance. But the palace, the grand palace of his teachings goes very, very high. And the foundation of his teachings goes very, very deep. And if we apply those teachings in our life, it leads to great transformational experiences that leads you to the experience of complete bliss and self-realization and ultimate purpose and meaning. He said that we should ultimately pray to serve the Vrijabasis, serve Sri Radha and Krishna and be present with them, but we have to develop that understanding based on the realization of what is the Atma. Sarva upadi vinirmuktam, ridding ourselves of temporary designations of that we are attaching ourselves to. I have this body, I have this mind. Manasa deha geho joki chumor arpya tuapare nanda kishore. I have this body and I have this mind. This is Bhaktivinoda Thakur's song. Manasa, my mind. Deha, my body. Geha, my home. More, joki chumor, whatever is mine. You see? So the body is good because it's yours now. It's a gift of God. God has given you this gift. God has given you this gift. God has given you this gift. Honor this gift. You know, like people who have a nice car and they identify themselves with the car. Okay, good, but take care of the car nicely, change the oil, don't wreck it. But also understand that the car is a vehicle for you, the Atma. And you should also care for the Atma. You should also develop the Atma. What's the point of waxing the car if you are starving inside? Right? So you should feed the soul as you feed the body. You should nourish the soul as you care for the body. That is our essential philosophy. Not to pretend that I am not this body and so I'm just like nothing. No. We are realizing our eternal body. And Prabhupada Bhaktsiddhanta is teaching us that. But in the meantime, the soul always wants embodiment. Whatever that Atma is, it wants to be embodied so it can act out its desires. So that is the perverted reflection in this material world of your spiritual nature, of your spiritual desire. So because you have a material body, the soul has a latent, dormant potentiality of a spiritual body. So the soul is not void. The soul has quality. The soul has name. The soul has characteristic. The soul, we talked about the 11 intrinsic characteristics of the soul. Your name, your family, your form, your relationship, your specific loving relationship with God. All those things are part of your soul. So Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada is situated on that liberated platform and is endeavoring to bring us to that spiritual platform. So we are not negationists. We are not nihilists. And we are not impersonalists. The soul ultimately is personality. And it's the process of discovering your pure personality. So you use this bodily personality and mind you have as a vessel for service, and you honor it as a servant of God, as a vessel in the service of God. And that can lead you to pure self-realization. That is our essential message. That every individual is unique. Every person, every spirit is unique. God knows the name of every single soul. All right? We'll leave it with that. Maybe that's your title, okay? We have our producers here. God knows the name of every soul. So you are not just light. You are not just consciousness without form. Your consciousness always wants form. It doesn't want to be disembodied. If you give up this material body prematurely and you become a ghost, then you're always haunting other bodies because you want embodiment. That's the soul's nature. So the soul has a name and the soul has eternal form and eternal characteristics or personality and activities. This is our essential philosophy. The soul has name, the soul has form, the soul has qualities, characteristics, and activities. Name, form, qualities, pastimes, just as God does. So we're always acting out that play in this life. My name, this is my name, I'm born. And we attach, they say, you know what the most dear sound to someone is? Their name. You say someone's name, dear Moonbeam Chandrika. Right? It's beautiful sounds. Especially if your beloved says it, right? Oh, my lover said my name. This is not a bad thing. Now we're going into overtime, but this is sometime, okay? You guys can tell me, stop, enough. What is this overtime? Somebody ring the class bell so it's over. But sometimes it takes time to make a point, all right? So I'm trying to establish the point that having a body is not bad, having a name is not bad, having personality is not bad, and wanting to perform activities is not bad. It's an indication of your spiritual nature and your spiritual desire. And in Scripture, it says God is the one eternal being of all the many eternal beings, and God alone can satisfy all desires. So we are not negationists. We do not believe that we are zero or should try to become zero. And our Guru would say that actually it's better to have desire than no desire. It's better to have lust than to be desireless. Right? Because what is the use of being desireless? Okay, then you just cease existing. A light bulb that is broken, that is not the spirit. That is not the nature of the Atma. Right? The nature of the self is not to become zero. That is a false ideology preached by those who are opposed to God, opposed to the service of God and relationship with God. The self does not exist. The self is zero. It's called the atheistic religion. And we are suffering, so we want to negate suffering, but ultimately we say, I do not exist. They say the soul is like a cabbage, and you peel off every layer and there's nothing in the center. Or like an onion, you peel off every layer, there's nothing at the center. That is not the teaching of the scripture. Vathato Brahma Jigyasa, inquire into the spirit, and the spirit is searching, so you cannot give up this body truly until you realize your spiritual body. You cannot give up your false ego until you realize your pure ego. You cannot give up your false name or your temporary names. It's not even false, temporary. It's not false body, it's a temporary body. So you cannot give up your changing of bodies and the temporary experiences of Maya, conditioned soul, until you realize your spiritual body. So therefore, our goal of life is bhav, the bliss of the experience of your spiritual identity as a unique individual soul. And God knows every soul's name. That is our philosophy. Krishna sits up on a tree and calls the name of every one of his associates as they come to him. He knows your soul's name. That's why our Guru would say that your soul has an inherent eternal form with an eternal name, the eternal identity, eternal features, eternal characteristics, eternal home, eternal family, and it's dormant as your potentiality, and God knows every soul's name. So this is the teaching of Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. Therefore, because every soul is unique, there are unlimited realms that are also liberated planets with which you can express your nature. Beyond liberation, liberation is when you turn a light switch on. That is liberation. You enter a dark room and you turn the switch on. That moment between darkness and light is liberation. But what happens once the lights come on? Right? Tell me. You walk into an empty room and it's dark. Wake up in the morning and it's dark. You turn the light on. That moment between darkness and light is called liberation. Psh, light comes on. Then what? Then life begins. Then life begins. Then you can express your desires. You can have a liberated planet. You can have a planet like God's. You can enjoy infinite varieties of pleasure, but not in the conditioned state of material life. So that is the purpose of joining ashram, self-realization. Therefore, you must commit yourself. How many years? He trained Lord Indra for almost 70 years. Yeah, there's different stories. I think I might have skipped one 32-year period. I was trying to make it a little easier. There's different variations of the story. Let me see if I can find it. But anyhow, okay, I can probably find it here. Okay, there's different versions, but this is directly from Chandogya Upanishad, chapter 8, and from verses 7 forwards. Okay? Direct translation from the Upanishads. So the first stage is done, then the second stage is done. I'm not going to read over it again. How can the dream self be the Atma, the self? All right? In a dream, one suffers, one is wounded, one weeps when afflicted. So he's telling him the dream state is the self. And he's saying beyond it. So Prajapati told him to stay with him for another period of 32 years. So there was the first 32 years. It's kind of crazy, huh? The first 32. Okay. Second 32. If the body is dead or destroyed, then there's a reflection of the living body. He said that the body is just a reflection of the Atma. And it becomes like a perverted reflection according to your ego. Right? A cat reflection. You know, the cat is looking in the water and it sees a cat. But the Atma is not a cat. The Atma can take on the body of a cat, but the Atma essentially is not a cat. So that's the reflection. So he said, Lord, I see really nothing worthy in this body or in its reflection. Please give me the true knowledge about the Atma. So Brahma was very happy and said, stay another 32 years. At the end of that period, he said, that which moves about in dreams, that is the Atma. Indra was satisfied. He went on his way, but then he had a doubt along the way and came back. How can the dream self be the Atma? In the dream, one suffers, one is wounded, or one is joyful. But how can that be the Atma? It's not subject to these temporary actions of the mind. So he says, again, stay 32 years. At the end of that time, he said, the self who is fully pleased and is in a happy mood in deep sleep is the Atma. And he said, how can that be the Atma? Because in a dreamless sleep, the self does not even know itself. You see, so we're getting to that state of void. He told him, the void is the Atma. And in the void, you're not suffering because you lose experience. So he said that self is deep sleep. Because when you're in deep sleep at night, when you're not even dreaming, then it's like you cease existing. So that's called nirvisheshavad or shunyavad, the state of zero. And that is an option. Buddhism is an option. You can become zero. The goal of nothingness can be achieved. But it's an erasal of the self. You're erasing your own self. Therefore, it's called spiritual suicide. And only sick people want to perform suicide. People who are very much suffering want that. Yes? So he said, that is not the self. Okay? And then he said, okay, stay another 5 years. I'm very happy with your persistent effort, your intense inquisitiveness. You desire to understand the highest thing. I will teach you that. Right? And then he teaches about the Atma. All right? And that's what we've been talking about. What is the Atma? So the Atma is seeking that eternal identity. We're looking for it. Until we realize our real spiritual nature, we're going to continue seeking this body, this path, that path. But when we come to full enlightenment, then at that stage of self-realization, I am not just spirit soul, but what is my name? That is our conception. What is my personal relationship with the divine, with God, in any of his manifestations, as Ram, as Krishna, as Narayan, as different avatars, or as my own liberated states. It's not that even beyond liberation, you have to have devotion even. There are many liberated souls who are happy, liberated sages, enjoying, blissful, right? But what is your eternal identity? And we cannot forsake the material identity. We must realize our spiritual identity. When the sun rises, the darkness is dispelled. So Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada taught us how to realize that eternal self. And tomorrow we're going to read different glories, different stories. We're just starting to hear about his glories. So I think everyone for their time will end with Sayan Arti for the deities. It's getting late. But we should offer our respects today to Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada. Pray for his mercy. His glories are, like I said, we know his glories according to what we've heard. But we should understand that he is present now. He is present with Krishna. And we should pray to him and to Krishna's associates to bless us with their mercy, that we can progress in this path to full transcendental life, self-realization. All right? Go Premanandi Hari Hari Go Vanchakalpa Trivascha Kripa Sindhu Vevacha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Hare Krishna.